let me first off start off by asking you this: as a candidate, as a politician, do you characterize yourself as a liberal, moderate, or conservative, and why?
Well, first of all, I hate when people try to put me in a box. I characterize myself as an American who's fed up and tired of standard politicians. I am somebody that believes in reasonable common sense approaches to things. And so a lot of people characterize me as being more moderate because I believe that we should have reasonable solutions to the problems that we face and not be so polarized. I think part of the problem is when you've got a guy like Mitch McConnell who's been entrenched for 35 years and who looks at everything solely through a political lens, that the answer for him is to always blame the other side. That's not what I'm all about. I've said from the very beginning of my campaign that I will work with any president, no matter whether that president wears a red jersey or a blue jersey, to do what's right for Kentucky, to get things like prescription drug prices down and better health care and things like that. And at the same time, I will stand up to any president or administration or anyone when it comes to two things. One, when it comes to what's right for Kentucky, or two, when it comes to the Constitution of the United States of America that I swore to uphold and defend 6 times in my life. So I'll let that out there for people, but that's who I am.
Have you met with your primary opponent yet?
You know, I have spoken with my primary opponent, and I know that, and he has told me he wants to do all he can to make sure that we beat Mitch McConnell in the fall. And I'm really excited because, you know, his many of the supporters for my primary opponents, all of them, brought passion and energy to this primary. And, you know, my message to them is, boy, I hear you. I hear you, and I want change too. And we share the same beliefs on, or we share a belief that we need to have better, more affordable and accessible healthcare for people. We share a belief that social justice is important, and we have to tackle the real racial injustice that we're seeing in this country and have been seeing for far too long. And we really share the belief that we got to defeat Mitch McConnell to do these things.
I want to ask you about racial injustice in a few minutes, but how do you unite the Democratic Party?
I think you unite the Democratic Party by showing people, hey, we need to do this. We need to do this by tackling, as I just mentioned, the issues of affordable, the things that we all want to get done: affordable and accessible healthcare, better wages, good quality jobs for people, tackling the real racial injustice that you're seeing, not only in the criminal justice system, but also in the underlying racial economic injustice that we've seen in this country for far too long. And so I think what I plan on doing is talking about those things, the same things that I launched this campaign on, and reminding people, hey, we've got to come together. We've got to defeat Mitch McConnell, because we're not going to be able to further these things unless we get rid of the man who really represents the Washington, D.C. swamp and special interests more than he represents Kentucky right now. I think people are tired of the massive polarization, the dysfunction that Mitch McConnell has brought. I think people know whether they're Republican or Democrat. When you say Mitch McConnell, they think, yeah, he's bought off by special interests. He doesn't really represent us. He cares about the wealthy, the money, the corporate interests. They know that. And I think, I need to be somebody that is, one, not bought off by those interests, but two, somebody that has common sense solutions for some of these problems. Most of us, we're in agreement more than we are in disagreement. We do believe that people should have better health care. We do believe that we ought to bring down prescription drug prices. We all want a better economy. We all want an economy that works for everyone, where people can, work a solid, full work week and be able to put food on the table for their children and not have to work 3 jobs to make ends meet. We just got to come together and, make it be somebody that people can believe in, who's going to put their interests above the interests of themselves or their corporate special interests or even their political party. And that's what Amy McGrath is all about.
You talk about special interest, and I would venture to say that there are probably some special interest groups that are supporting you. So if it's wrong for him, why isn't it wrong for you?
Well, I would say that, let's talk about Big Pharma, okay, as an example. I'm somebody that believes in our democracy and the fact that, we ought to be able to debate on the Senate floor bills, whether it's a bill about getting prescription drug prices down, or Gil, whether it's about the minimum wage. Gil, you may believe that minimum wage should stay at $7.25. And maybe my husband believes it should be $9. And maybe I believe it should be $15. Here's the thing. We can't even debate that right now because Mitch McConnell has stopped debate in our Senate, the very body of our democracy that is supposed to hash out these problems and vote on it in a democratic way is not functioning because of him. So when you look at things like special interest, when I talk about Big Pharma, even President Trump has talked about getting prescription drug prices down. He's talked about being able to have, negotiate prices in Medicare. He's talked about being able to have re-import prescription medication across the border from Canada. Why can't we get any of those things done? I'll tell you why. Mitch McConnell won't allow any of those bills. There's 6 bipartisan bills, that have passed the House that he won't even allow to the floor of the Senate for even a debate. Why? Well, it's not rocket science. He's bought off by Big Pharma, literally bought off. He gets the most money from Big Pharma than any member of Congress last cycle, last year. And that's the reason. And so in my mind, you've got to get rid of that to get our democracy functioning back again. And, and that's what I'm committed to doing.
Now, in doing some research preparing for this, I saw that 4 of your top 10 financial contributors are from the tech world, the tech industry, like Google, Microsoft. Are you kind of hoping sort of use that to bring some kind of tech industry or another industry to Kentucky?
Well, I think we can bring a lot of different industries to Kentucky. I would love for the tech industry to come to Kentucky. And this is one of the things that I've talked about. Here's the thing. We have some serious problems with broadband in Kentucky. We are 47th in the country in terms of broadband speed. Now, when people talk about infrastructure, a lot of people think about roads, bridges, dams, sewer systems, and fixing those things from 70 years ago. And that's important. And they're good quality jobs that we can do just fixing 20th century infrastructure. But boy, we got to have leaders that understand what the jobs of the future are going to be. The jobs of the future are going to require 21st century infrastructure. And I'm talking broadband. I'm talking cell phone coverage. Here's the fact. No business is going to want to come to a county in Kentucky that cannot talk to the modern world. It's a fact. We're not going back to 1965. And the biggest difference between myself and Mitch McConnell in this area is here is a man who doesn't want to invest in these things. He doesn't want to invest in the future. I am somebody that does, and I want to do it in a public way. The same way President Eisenhower, Republican president, invested in the interstate highway system in the 1950s. He didn't say, oh, let's let the private sector do that. And if it's profitable for the private sector, we'll invest in that. No, he said, we got to come together as a country. It's important for our national security. It's important for our economy. And guess what? We had the largest infrastructure project the world has ever seen. And it built our economy. And thank God Senator McConnell wasn't in the Senate back then because he wouldn't allow it to the floor. Okay?
Now, let's talk specifically about Eastern Kentucky, where our viewers are. What is your economic vision for this region of our state?
Well, there's 3 things that we need to do. First of all, to rebuild Eastern Kentucky. And my core message is this. Mitch McConnell's been around 35 years, folks. Look around. Are things getting any better? He's let our signature industries in Eastern Kentucky get into decline without a plan for the future. You can argue about how we got there. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the future, and he doesn't have a plan. So what do? We have to have investment, as I just mentioned, in infrastructure, not just 20th century infrastructure, but broadband and cell phone coverage. It's real. We need it, and we need it in a public way. That's number 1. Number 2, we've got to have real investment in education and workforce development for the jobs of the future. Okay. And number 3, we've got to tackle healthcare. And I'm not just talking about getting prices for prescription drugs down and getting better affordable healthcare with insurance prices down. I'm talking about tackling the opioid drug epidemic that we have. 30% of Eastern Kentuckians know somebody who is addicted or is struggling with addiction. The Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, which is not exactly a left-leaning organization, has said that the drug problem is one of the single biggest impediments to growth. It's real. And we have to tackle it in a meaningful way with prevention and treatment. And that's what I want to do. So I think those are the three pillars, along with being open, Gil, being open to new industries. We just got to be honest. There are other parts of the country that have been able to revitalize and move forward by being open to new industries. And I think we need to have a senator that is.
Now, speaking of the senator, there was an AP story that said that he's considering another round of aid, coronavirus aid for people making $40,000 or less. He says the package should be $1 trillion. Democrats say $3 trillion. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think the first thing that we need to do is focus on aid to state and local governments. Governor Beshear here in Kentucky has said that we have a $500 million shortfall just this year. Now that's real jobs. Those are public servants, our school systems, our firefighters, our police officers. We have to have that aid. I think we also have to focus on national testing and better protective equipment, making sure that we are covering our first line responders. In addition, we have a lot of people who are out of work right now because of the coronavirus. They are in the service industry. They were sports photographers, for example, people who that I met in the unemployment line in Frankfurt just a couple of weeks ago. And I asked them, hey, what do you do? Why are you here? And there's a lot of hardworking individuals that just don't have work because of this virus right now. So we need to take care of them. And so I believe we need to make sure that unemployment insurance is there and continues. And we need some federal help with that. What a lot of people don't understand is state and local governments cannot run up those deficits the way that the federal government can. And so the federal government needs to help everyday Kentuckians. And so that's what I think we should focus on going forward.
But it seems to me that in doing this, stories on aid and these aid packages, I mean, how long can the federal government just continue to print money, to help you? I mean, I get helping people, but where do we balance that with, hey, there's got to be an endpoint somewhere. We just can't keep printing money. I mean, does that make sense?
It's interesting. I wish Senator McConnell would say would have thought that when he gave massive tax cuts in the 2 years he had all the power to the wealthiest Americans and corporations, getting us into even more of a deficit and more of a debt. And in fact, under his leadership, our debt has skyrocketed. Now here we are in an actual crisis where we need the federal government to help us. We are the richest nation on earth. We should have the federal government be able to help everyday Kentuckians. So let's do that. People should not be hurting here when the federal government can help. And I think it requires leadership. And beyond that, even, I think we need to tackle this pandemic. We cannot get the economy back until we actually are clear-eyed about tackling this pandemic and doing what we need to do to mitigate the risks. So unfortunately, we had a senator, and Senator McConnell, who didn't even had the highest levels of intelligence briefings. And when was the first time he even told us about the pandemic? It wasn't until the stock market crashed, because that's what he cares about. I think we need a senator who's actually going to care about Kentuckians, and we need to tackle this pandemic and take care of our economy and people.
Now, let's talk about that social injustice now. Along those same lines, what do you think about all the tearing down and damaging of all the statues across the country?
Well, look, people are angry, and rightfully so. And I think we need to take a hard look at the symbols that we have in this country and what they mean. I'm somebody that believes in our democracy, and that if you want to remove a statue, that you run for office and you get into a position where the people can vote in a reasonable way to take a look at those things and remove them if they need to be removed. I was for Governor Beshear when his actions of removing the statue of Jefferson Davis from the capital of Kentucky. Kentucky was not even in the Confederacy. So in my mind, that was the right thing to do. I was a Marine for 20 years. I was very proud of the United States Marine Corps. For way back in April, the Commandant of the Marine Corps came out and said, you know what? We're going to get rid of all Confederate flags on Marine Corps installations. Why? It's the right thing to do. That's why. You know what flag I serve? I served the Stars and Stripes my whole life. And that's what the Marine Corps serves. And I think that was the right thing to do. And so, as leaders, these are the types of things that we need to stand for. I stand for the American flag.
Are you for renaming some of the bases that have Confederate names?
I think they should absolutely be renamed. We should look at this. Look, there are so many Americans who have served this country, who we can name bases after, who we can be proud of. There's a Kentuckian by the name of Charles Young. He was one of the first Black Americans to graduate from West Point back in the 1800s. These are people we should be proud of. And I think that it's time to look at some of these base names and say, hey, is this a name that we want to have that represents our country, our Marine Corps, our Army, the Army of the United States of America, and who fought for the United States of America. I think those are really important things to look at, and we need leaders to do that.
Another topic, especially I would say in Eastern Kentucky and probably throughout all of Kentucky, you have a lot of gun owners. And the typical thing that, hey, Democrats are going to take away our guns. Let me just be blunt. Will you be for taking away guns?
Well, I always tell people, look, I'm not going to take your guns. I got my own guns. I was a United States Marine for 20 years. I'm a gun owner. My husband is a gun owner. And I went to combat 3 times in my life. And 2 of those times were flying an F-18, and I had a 9mm strapped to my chest when I did that. So I'm no stranger to weapons. I believe in the Second Amendment. At the same time, I'm a mother of 3 small kids. And I do believe that gun violence, school violence is definitely an issue that we have to tackle in this country. And I'm somebody that is reasonable about this. Most gun owners I know are for the idea that we should know who's buying a weapon. We should have a background check that covers when you buy a weapon. Most gun owners and non-gun owners are for this. And I think that if we can get people in office who frankly are not bought off by special interest groups, we can do the right thing here and try to move forward with this.
Lastly, I wanted to ask you this question, and I intend on asking Senator McConnell whenever I get the chance with him. I hear a lot of criticisms, obviously, from you of Senator McConnell. Is there anything positive that you can say about the senator?
Well, I think when he was elected senator way back when I was 8 years old, I think he started out and tried to represent Kentucky. And I think over time, anybody that's been in Washington for that long changes. I think, maybe he started out and this is the problem with our system. This is why I'm for term limits. I don't think anybody should be in Washington for 40 years. I just think the swamp in Washington, D.C. changes you. But I would say, he has served Kentucky for that long, and that service at one time was done and done effectively for the 1980s. But now it's time to move on, and we need a new generation of leaders. So that's what I would say.
Going forward with coronavirus, are your campaigning methods going to change, or how will you deal with the coronavirus?
Well, I mean, we're taking it day by day, just like every Kentuckian and every American. The coronavirus is sort of unprecedented, right? And I don't want to do anything that's going to hurt public health. And so, we adapted my campaign in the primary to make sure that we could reach out to voters. We did teletown halls once a week. I did Zoom calls and things like that. We'll continue that. But boy, I'm really excited and hopeful that now, as things are starting to open up, Gil, in Kentucky, that I'm going to be able to get around. And, and if it's not massive public events where we have lots of people coming, at least we'll figure out a way to get around and talk to people in accordance with public health, using social distancing, doing things that are outdoors, that kind of thing. So I'm excited to get started with that. I just think it's time for change. I think that's what you heard loud and clear in the primary. People are excited for that. They're excited to get rid of somebody that's been around too long. And we need a message of hope and change. And this is what I'm standing for. This is why I got into this. It's a tough thing to run for office. There's a lot of untruths out there, but at the end of the day, people just want solid leaders. And I'm out there. I'm up for the challenge. I've been up for the challenges all my life, and we're going to do this thing.